There was the smell of salt water and tired perfume in the air, and the sky was bleeding orange into indigo over the Venetian lagoon. For it was the year 1571, and the city of Venice, La Serenissima, enjoyed the summit of its naval prowess. Clad in silks, her canals shimmered with the weight of power, wealth, and secrets, like a queen. As night descended across the terracotta rooftops and gilded domes, the gondolas lifted off their moorings like mute black swans, slipping into darkness. There was no other city in the Western world like Venice, built on hundreds of wooden stakes, hammered into the lagoon centuries ago. It was shining like a jewel of the Renaissance, quietly reverberating with the low intensity of a civilization that had, through trade and treachery, established itself across the known world. This night, so blithely unexceptional to the gondoliers whistling under their breath, would set gossips aflutter down the length of its canals, and with luck a few tongues might brush against the edges of history. The day began innocently enough. Vendors screamed past heaps of Eastern spices, the rolls of damask silk wicked up from Constantinople, now Istanbul. The narrow alleys of the Rialto market were packed tight. Nobles purchasing Turkish coffee beans for their salons, matrons arguing with fishmongers over fresh sardines, thieves dipping fingers into pockets the way one might slide a ripe fig from its branch. In the far-off arsenal, the city's naval yards, the clatter of hammers beat on wood and steel, in the shaping of ships for war and trade. Workaday Venice, as always, was a city of work. But behind the facades, not everything in La Serenissima was sereno. A council had just adjourned in a dark corner of the Doge's palace. The Doge Alvise, I Mochnigo, old and sickly, had led a council of 10, a powerful ruling class of political and social elite that men feared or disdained. They were speaking in hushed, frantic tones. Dangers lurked to the east. The Ottoman Empire was emboldened once more, its fleets churning the Aegean. Rumors of trouble, possibly war, swept in like a storm wind. One of the men at the table, Niccolo Brigadin, was a young patrician noble whose family had been serving the Republic for some time. His father had fallen in defense of Cyprus, and now Niccolo carried the burden of duty, diplomacy, and vengeance. His gondola was waiting for him by the palace steps that night, as black as any ink and shiny as a mirror. To San Zaccaria, he had said to the gondolier, but his was no destination of prayer, except pointing his way to politics. As his gondola glided through the waters, another Venice came to life in the city, one of which there was no record on the official map or ledger. Enamored men loved. In the darkness below, stone bridges etched with angelic likenesses. Men in cloaks passed messages in code by lantern light. And in other places, music wafted out from open windows of palazzos, where masked balls came alive. Still, in the beauty and splendor of the city, a figure moved in the shadows, cloaked as ever he was. Lucetta Verin, courtesan and spy, his form as changeable as the tides, with hair as dark as the wings of ravens, and a mind sharper than any blade in the arsenal. She had worked for Venice and against her, changing allegiance as easily as masks. During Carnival, and on this night, she had worn red, the color of danger, blood, and secrets. She was en route to the Palazzo Contarini del Figa, where a ball in honor of a visiting Florentine ambassador was already in progress, and it was there, in Pisa, that she would locate Niccolo, and bring him a message that had come from the east, from a trader who had seen something terrible, ... At the harbor in Alexandria, a fleet, a plan, a name, the Grand Palazzo, rulers of the Grand Canal, its wall bathed in torchlight and laughter. Gondolas were moored, a row of the curved ferro blades edged with moonlight, like a line of ceremonial knives. Within, marble halls resounded with madrigals, the whirl of stalls, and the clinking of crystal. Niccolo walked in, to the sound of applause, his very presence a source of power and hope to a republic struggling for its existence. He smiled, bowed, took greetings, and his eyes were on the crowd. Looking, Lucetta found him first. Signore Brigadin, she breathed and brushed past him, her gloved hand leaving a folded note in his palm. A dance, maybe, to remember old days. He gazed into her eyes, and what he saw was war. Up the hall they went, to a space that emptied, as though by magic as soon as they had cleared it. A violin began, and the crowd heaved forward, but neither her nor he heard it. Still turning her, both moving slowly and by the inch, he pulled out the note from behind, reading the message. He read the lines. The lion is in danger. The crescent sails. Cyprus is only the beginning. And trust no one, not even the council. His breath caught. He looked at Lucetta. Where did this come from? A trader from Alexandria. He's already dead, she said. Poison. But only after he paid me in truth. And then, as if the night itself let out a sigh, the lights dimmed on purpose. A performance. A moment of theatrical indulgence. Then, a scream. Then steel dot outside on the surface. A group of masked men danced off boats and into the water, dressed in black and silent, glittering knives shimmering under the stars. Amid the confusion in the ballroom, a guard fell, his throat slit by a man dressed as a servant. It was no robbery. It was a warning. Venice was blood, a resplendent account of blood. Niccolo yanked Lucetta behind a marble column as guests ran away, shouting. Unconscious, on the floor of his cell, lay the governor of Florence, with a dagger in his breast. And from the blackness, a voice whispered, "The sea remembers." The remainder of the night dissolved into a whirl of fire, darkness, and flight. Niccolo and Lucetta took to the water by gondola, slipping along back canals past mute chapels and empty shops. The city paused in its step by shock. They would not sleep. In a city that dreamed on water and woke with a knife at its throat, there was no time for rest. And as the bells of midnight clanged from St. Mark's Campanile, Niccolo edged toward a canal near his family home and gazed out at the lagoon. Somewhere out there, beyond the lapping waters and ancient piles of wood, a war was being waged, a kind that Venice might not recover from. "This is only the first," Lucetta said, beside him, and indeed, it was. Venice never truly slept, even during the stillest part of the night, when the bells had ceased their ringing and the wine-stained laughter of the taverns was absorbed into the fog. The city still roared, a living being, breathing under her cloak of stone. The water did more than reflect. It contained secrets, echoes, ghosts. By the time Niccolo Bragadin made his way back to Car Bragadin, degli Usseri, his family's imposing palazzo on the serpentine canal of San Polo, it was almost 3 in the morning. The structure rose like a silent testament to centuries of glory and defeat. Its grand facades, once covered in luminous frescoes of winged lions and maritime victories, had faded, eaten away by salt and time. But inside, the halls were pure, silent, watching. Lucetta came in after him, her crimson skirts whispering across the black and white marble floor as she stood before him in her boots, cool and silent as poppies. She hadn't taken off her masks, the one she'd worn to the ball, and the gilded edges, painted so prettily gold, still gleamed like a portent in the candlelight. "You should burn that," Niccolo said, indicating the mask by the fireplace. His voice was low, distant. "I ought to burn a lot of things," she replied, and drew it slowly off, disclosing the wan sharpness of her face. Her beauty was not the melting kind described by minstrels. It was arresting the way a well-crafted blade was, dangerous and elegant and perfectly honed. But there are some masks that are not made of paper-match. Niccolo sat in a chair, carved of wood, beside the hearth, and filled 2 cups with wine. He passed her one with hands that shook a little. "The ambassador is dead," he said. "The council will sweep this under the rug. Say he died of fever or a heart attack. Maybe he drank too much, but we know, you and I know. ... We saw it." She took a sip. "And you read the message?" He nodded. "The Ottoman fleet is mobilizing. Cyprus was only the beginning, and someone, maybe multiple people on the council, is already tainted." A silence, snowflake-light, descended between them. Outside, a gondolier floated by, humming an old folk tune, the sort made famous by singer-fishermen who thought the sea had ears for prayers. Niccolo stood and began pacing. "I must tell the Doge, he will listen." Lucetta's eyes flicked toward him. "Mocenigo is a dying man. He rattles in his chest like a broken bell. Now he listens only to ghosts. And the Tendu, you truly think they do not already know this message? Wasn't that it wasn't supposed to get to you?" The words landed on him like a slap. "You think it was a trap? Nothing in Venice, I think, happens by accident, including who delivers a letter, including me." He turned toward her. "Then, why did you bring it?" "Because," she said, moving closer to him in a slow and deliberate way, "I'm still in someone's debt. To your father, and perhaps to you." That silenced him. Years ago, decades before war, rustled a murmur from the east. Lucetta had been nothing but some Harin training, bright, driven, and definitely invisible, until she was found stealing state papers of a minor noble. A punishment could have been public whipping, or even branding, but it had been Marcantonio Brogadine, the father of Niccolo, who had intervened and given her protection for a price. Loyalty. He had made her a ghost in silk, a listener and a messenger, and a sound so difficult to trace. In rooms where men believed themselves unobserved, he trusted her. He had, even as others had doubted. For when they caught him during the Ottoman siege of Famagusta, flayed him alive for having resisted, something in Lucetta had been broken. She had no family, but she had owed him her name. Now his son was before her, anger and fear burning behind those regal eyes. He was the image of the father, but more fragile, more conflicted. The world was no longer swords and banners. It was poisoned pens and silent gondolas. Outside, the fog was thickening, and something else stirred from the rooftops of Venice. 3 men in black cloaks gathered in a dark alley near the Scuola Grande di San Rocco, under a decaying arch. It was in Arabic they exhorted me, not Italian, their dialect harsh, fast, urgent. The message was delivered. Yes, she gave it to the son. And the father, dead long ago. A pause. Then we are on schedule. These were not Ottomans. Not entirely. They were spies from the Janissaries, but not for Sultan in Istanbul. They answered to something older, a secret network that had existed since the fall of Constantinople, running like spider threads from Alexandria to Algiers to Ragusa to Venice. Theirs was not a purely military mission. It was mystical. For Venice didn't merely contain riches of gold and silver. Scrolls and the relics and maps imprisoned secretly in its oldest monasteries, all said to be sketched by Crusaders, by Templars, and, ironically, by those heretics. Some spoke of old sea gates, places where the world was used up and gods whispered, and one of those maps was missing, by Marcantonio Brogadine. Where it was now lost, or held locked by his son. Back at C.A. Brogadine, Niccolo stood up and strolled to the open fire, where he took a small carved lion's head from the top of the chimney-piece. He pressed it. There was a soft snick, and a section of the wall slid open, leaving an opening to a narrow, dark staircase. Lucetta raised an eyebrow. "You hid something?" He lit a lantern. "No, he did." Joining me, the pair of us made our way down, the air becoming colder the deeper we went. It was sheathed in stone, and strange symbols were cut into the mortar surfaces, Venetian, Greek, unknown. At the end of the latter, a wooden chest, bound with iron, cased all around, the lid opening with a 3-key lock. Niccolo took a deep breath. Behind it he felt for, and discovered a bronze key within a small compartment of the machine, and with this he unlocked one of the locks. It turned with a heavy groan. "One is mine," he said. Lucetta got down on her knees and pulled a second key from a locket she wore around her neck, a present from his father. She inserted it. The lock clicked again. "The third?" she asked. Nick looked grim. "That is what we must find." He opened the chest. Neatly wrapped in oilcloth and tied together with red ribbon was a parchment. Niccolo slowly unraveled it, unveiling an ancient map. The yellowing, cracking parchment seemed to throb with hidden vitality. It was a nautical chart, but unlike anything produced by known Venetian cartographers, the Adriatic, the Ionian, the Aegean, but there were ink marks no one had used, lost to time, names of the local places, and at the center of the map, off the eastern coast of Crete, a symbol, a sun, whose rays are surrounded by waves and eyes. Lucetta's breath caught. "The seal of the Mare Occulta," she murmured. "The hidden sea," Niccolo said. "The one no one speaks of, the one my father died defending." Up high, in the dark tower of the Doge's palace, another pair of eyes saw the fog come. A man with paper-white skin and robes of blood-red silk turned from the window and spoke to the darkness behind him. "They opened the vault," he added. A voice answered. "Shall we intervene?" "Not yet. Let the pieces move. The mask will fall of itself." And up the lagoon from beyond the city, a lone ship sailed toward her. Its sails bore no crest. Its lanterns, unlike gold, were blue, and its name, the Sea Widow, was not only carved in wood that didn't come from Europe. Sounds from its hull were breathing-like, and on its crest was the figure of a woman with ink-black eyes and a tattoo of the Mare Occulta seared into her wrist. She smiled. It would not be long before Venice would be reminded of what it had tried to forget. By dawn, Venice seemed innocent once more. Golden light overflowed onto the red-tiled rooftops and danced on the gilded domes of San Marco. The pigeons had come back to the square, and everything seemed the same as before. The market resumed its shouting. The bells of Santa Maria della Salute pealed in the morning like there was no bloodshed the night before. But deep within the lagoon, a gale had already moored itself. The Sea Widow was like no ship in the Venetian navy. There was no entry in the logbooks of the arsenal declaring her design. She was not the subject of any merchant caravan's entry. It had simply turned up black sails, lashed up, sailing silently just outside the customs cordon of Lido. Its hull was made of a dark hard wood, the sort only from the Levant. Her figurehead, unconventional for the time, bore a carved eye with emanating waves, rather than the traditional angel or siren, and her commanding officer, neither listed and flying no flag, to the customs agent sent to examine her. She was something between a ghost and a menace. "You have to declare your ship." He barked from his skiff, shining a lantern. One figure stood on the deck, dressed in blue-grey robes like the greens that ripple in an underwater current. Her face was veiled. She held onto the rail with her slender, olive-toned bare hands. She did not speak. I said, "Identify yourself." The officer barked a whisper. That was all he heard. A few minutes later, his skiff was discovered floating near the dock of San Pietro, with no one in it. The lantern still burned at the same time. Niccolò Brugadin waited in the reverberating spaces of the Scuola Grande di San Giovanni Evangelista. For a man few Venetians now remembered to exist any longer. Father Benedetto Sodano, the only surviving chronicler of the seal of the Mare Occulta. The Scuola stained glass threw colored lights across the marble floor, where mosaics showed St. John struggling with dragons and serpents, but Niccolò knew the true monster was the sea, or what was underneath it, to be more accurate. Father Benedetto came slowly, his white cassock turned to ivory, the sound of a tapping cane. His eyes lit at the sight of Niccolò, despite their dullness from age. "You are the son," said the old priest. "I see it in your face. My father once told me that you knew things that not even the council believed. I know too much. That's why I live like a ghost." Benedetto gestured to a side chapel. "Come, we should not be heard." They stepped into the cramped room in which frescoes were peeling off the walls like old sheets of parchment. Benedetto lit a candle and took a rusted key from one of the recesses of his old tunic. "You've seen the map," he declared. "Yes," Niccolò replied. "My father left it for me. There is a third key. Do you know where it is?" The old priest gazed at him a long instant and at length spoke. "There is no key." Niccolò blinked. "What do you mean, there never was?" "The third key is a person, and one who carries the mark of the occulta. Your father said it was a song title, a metaphor. I no longer do." In another part of Venice, Lucetta ambled, on her own, through the back streets of Dorsoduro, her dagger concealed under her mantle, fragments of the letter recurring in her mind. She needed information. More, in fact, than Niccolò or even the Doge's own agents could provide her. There was one man who could help Matteo Lafenzi, the most feared hitman in Venice, and her one-time lover. He existed, if that was the word, in an abandoned foundry near the Misericordia Canal, where once molten iron had poured and now only pigeons and poisoners ran loose. She discovered him honing a blade, a hawk upon the beam above. "You smell of betrayal," he said, without looking up. "I need you to look," she answered. "And your memory." He set the blade down. "Whose name do you want?" "No name. A ship, black sails, no crest, appeared overnight." Matteo froze. "You saw it. It's real." "Then the stories were true as well," he whispered. "They said she would arrive in a ship with eyes, that for her to use her voice and be heard would kill a man." Lucetta frowned. Matteo grabbed a pouch and threw a coin at her. One side featured a lion, recognizable. On one, an eye surrounded by waves. "She's not Ottoman. She's older than the Ottomans. Older than Venice. She's a priestess of the drowned gods." And that night, as the fog settled onto the lagoon, once more, the 10 met in secret session. Their chamber was hewn out of Istrian stone and shuttered till it was almost as dark as a heart, its candles fluttery and shy. "The ship of friends has come," declared their senior oldest, "and the Brigadon boy, he has the map." And the girl, silence. Then a voice, "One, do we take them off?" "No," said another. "Let them go further. Let them lead us to the key." A figure listened behind a curtain, unseen. Lucetta, she'd followed one of the counselors on Matteo's slate, and now she knew the truth. The council didn't want the Mare Occulta destroyed. The council wanted to control it, to wield what lay beneath the eastern sea. Gods, monsters, power, and, as she slipped between the shadows of the palace, she no longer simply felt, but heard something shift in the air, like a deep inhale. The water in the canal below her gondola whirling abruptly, and there, rising partway out of it, seen only as a bulging, infinite shape, not really grasped, but felt was something too big to have a name. The gondolier screamed. Lucetta peered into the black depths, and for an instant, she met an eye looking back. It blinked, then vanished. Niccolo found her in the square the next morning. "We must leave," she said. "We have got to find the women on that boat. She's the key. She's worth dying for." Dad Niccolo glanced out to see where the sea widow still droned ghost-like on the horizon. "I'm afraid Venice's destiny is not the only one at risk here." Lucetta nodded. "It's the world." The sun never came up in Venice that day. There it stood dim, pallid, under a mantle of mist, so close that even the gilded angel of the Campanile di San Marco looked like bent beneath it. The lagoon was placid, disturbingly placid, like a mirror that covered something dangerous underneath, and the sea widow lay ever still beyond the horizon, and ever watchful. Niccolo Brogadine and Lucetta Varin waited on the quay by the church of San Giorgio Maggiore for a single gondola, given to them after threats and payment. "I thought we were going to die," the gondolier mumbled, "but you two seem like you've already made your peace." Niccolo didn't respond. He was staring at the horizon, where the bulk of the ship huddled like a wound sewn into the fog. Lucetta was the first to enter the boat. Her boots made no sound. "You still may live, gondolier," she announced, "if you're not looking." In her eyes, silently they rowed across the lagoon. The fog appeared to fight against each stroke of the oar and grow thicker like oil. There were no birds here. No fish leaped from the water. The ship was the only sound, lapping of water and the sometimes creak of the sea widow. No wind stirring her canvas. Niccolo kept the map in his lap, with the red ribbon now tied around it once more. He could feel it hum, nearly warm, as if it knew it was so much bigger than they thought it would be when they finally hit the ship's hull. Its sides were encrusted, not with algae or rope, but with carvings, symbols that dated back further than any maritime code. Stars, waves, and scores of eyes. Some open, some shut, some bleeding. All at once out fell a rope ladder, as if an invisible hand had let it drop. Lucetta and Niccolo looked at one another. Then she climbed. The deck of the Sea Widow was still. No crew, no lanterns, except for that whisper again. That whisper. The one that whispers 1,000 whispers beneath the fine plains of sound. At the helm stood a woman. She wore no veil now. Her face was ageless, not in a beautiful way, but in a mountainous way, weathered, stern, etched by centuries. Her face was olive-skinned, and her eyes black as volcanic glass, the entire horizon in those orbs. She had no weapons. She needed none. "I am Velia," she said. Her voice was in the air, in the wood, in their bones. "And you are late." Niccolo took a step, the map stretched out in his outstretched hand as an offering. "My father died for this." Velia nodded. "He did, and his death opened a door, one that cannot be closed now." Lucetta narrowed her eyes. "What are you?" Velia gazed back at her, and for an instant, Lucetta's breath caught in her throat. Deep in Velia's eyes, she saw waves the size of palaces, cities drowned, a great gate under the sea. "I am the last voice of the drowned gods," Velia said, "and the tide is rising." Down in the hold, Velia led them through passages where no visible flame burned. The vessel appeared to be alive, wood which throbbed and groaned and breathed. There were no crew quarters, no storerooms, nothing but a central chamber at the keel, where a single globe of glass hung floating in mid-air, rotating lazily. "This is the Eye of Thessal," Velia said. "It remembers, it sees all waters, past, present, and sometimes possible." Nick stepped closer. In the orb, he saw flashes, his father dying in chains, the Council of 10 handing gold to veiled Ottomans, a storm breaking over the Adriatic, and besides that, a monstrous thing rearing up from below, something with tentacles and teeth. Its head adorned with the faces of sailors lost over centuries. Luce pressed the orb and gasped. She saw herself older, wearing red again, alone, on top of the Doge's palace, as it burned beneath her. She pulled her hand back. "What is this?" Velia answered. "Prophecy, memory, madness. They all look alike." At sea, in Venice, meanwhile, the Council of 10 got some sobering news. The ship continues to float. One whispered, "They've boarded it. It's time." "Then," said another, "summon the choir." Below the foundations of San Marco, the 12 men in dark robes assembled. Men who were not monks, yet not guards either. Bred from birth to defend Venice against enemies not human, but myth. The choir of Saint Spiridione had not sung for a century. Now they chanted, a hymn composed in a language that's more ancient than Latin. A spell, a curse, a summoning. Lagoon began to churn. Back on the sea, widow Velia whirled around for a moment, her eyes shadowed. "They're hollering the chorus," she said. "Venice thinks it can rein the sea back in." Niccolo stepped back. "What do they want from us?" Velia faced him fully now. "Your father took the map." "Yes. More important, though he made a copy, one they believe you hold. But they are wrong." She pointed at Lucetta. "She is the true map." Lucetta blinked. "Me." Velia nodded. "Your body bears the mark. You come from the line of the priests of Holly. You were always the key." Niccolo regarded her, his partner, his spy, his father's debt. Now, she was more Lucetta, stared at her hands, and saw for the first time a small, almost indiscernible mark on the inside of her wrist. The same one from the map, a ring of ripples around an opened eye. "I never knew," she whispered. "You were not supposed to," Velia said. "But now, you must choose." She offered a crooked, coral-etched dagger. "You can wake the gate, below the mare or Kelter, or you can seal it again. Both paths are pain. One is survival, one is change." Lucetta took the blade. It was warm, and in the background, over her shoulder, thunder rolled. No storm cloud in the sky, only something rising. The silence was ripped in two over Venice. There was no thunder, no wind, nothing it seemed, but light, pallid, brief, unnatural, as though a crack had been torn in the skin of the sky. It shone purple and blue over the lagoon, and then it was gone as quickly as it had arrived, and the water lay plate-flat and shivering dot in the Palazzo Ducale. High over the San Marco piazza, with its gaudy columns, the Doge woke, screaming Marcantonio. He gurgled, scratching at the air. The gates open. Servants scurried to his chambers, but the Doge Alvise I Mochnigo, the Lion of Venice no more, was already descending into madness. But he never saw stone ceilings. He saw waves curling where ancient beasts barked. His final days had begun. The water, the sea widow groaned like an animal, descended again into slumber. In the orb room. Down below, Velia's hands danced in mid-air over the floating sphere, as if she were directing a symphony that no one could hear. Lucetta and Niccolo, once two allies, now faced each other on opposite ends of the chamber. Yet their link was not a new thing, but something very much older. Prophecy. "She's the one," Velia had told me. But keys Lucetta knew also, could open as well as close. "I do not want this," she told herself, looking at the tattoo of her blood under her skin. It was brighter now alive. "You were chosen long before you had a desire in the matter," Velia answered. "When the gods of the deep, known as the Mare or Galta, sank into the sea, they left behind three things. Their Madaris, humans possessed by spirits of the gods, the ocean gate, and a single island on the northern sea, Mare Istiltir." "A daughter," Niccolo echoed. "You mean Lucetta is..." "She is of the line of high priestesses, of the deep gate, blood, memory, and purpose. It was always her way to face what's real, for she had her father and you. Her way, yes. For when the last veil fell, when your father took the map, she put her path before her." Lucetta looked away, clenching the grip of the coral knife. "I'm a courtesan, not a savior." "You are both," Velia whispered. "And the sea doesn't forget." In Venice once again, the choir of Saint Spiridione resumed chanting in a candlelit sanctuary beneath the church of San Francesco della Vigna. Old Latin strained into languages, older than Rome. The surrounding waters obliged and darkened. Shifting, something moved in them. From the east came the ships, 3 of them, with the sails of the Ottoman, but not the colors. These were ghost fleets, talked about for decades, but never proved. Manned by the Abner or Moj, sons of the wave. Their commander, Admiral Safia Roman, a woman as feared in her own right as any pirate, as devout as any priest. Her main ship, the Lament of Alexandria, had a bow designed in the form of a shark's gaping maw, and would allegedly set sail only by night. She was on deck now, wearing a dark blue robe, a scimitar at her waist. "The gate is rousing," she told her first mate. "How do you know, my lady?" She gazed out to sea, out over the Adriatic, toward Venice. Because I hear it calling. At the same time, in the Arsenal, the heart of Venetian naval preeminence councillor Domenico Malpietro rendezvoused with a foreign envoy in secret. His name was one that was never said out loud. He wore no signet, no crest. Nothing stood in the place of that but a ring with the insignia of an eye eating a star. You said you had a way to put an end to it, Malpiero mumbled. The envoy leaned forward. We do, but it depends on the death of the key. Malpiero flinched. The girl, she is not a girl. She is a doorway. Do you have any idea what happens when you leave a door open too much? Malpiero didn't answer. Venice will not live through the awakening of the gate, but we can control it now, with her sacrifice. For another 100 years, maybe longer, and that would cost us. The envoy smiled. Only your soul. But you sold that ages ago, didn't you? On board of the Sea Widow again, Lucetta now stood on the ship's prow alone. The fog had just lifted for her. Black water extended in all directions beneath a sky without stars. No sound, no wind, just silence. Then a voice, not human, not spoken. It opened in her mind like ink in water. Daughter of waves, do you remember the drowning? She gasped and dropped to her knees, eyes open wide. Memories not her own rolled through her. A temple below the sea, its columns etched in spirals of bone and coral. Women in blue robes chanting. A sacrifice, a door of black stone that is bloodlocked. The land betrayed us. Now we rise. She screamed. She was met moments later by Niccolo, who held her in his arms. What happened? She looked at him, sweat beading on her forehead. I saw them, she whispered. I saw everything. The gate is real. Niccolo, and it's angry. That night, the winds returned. The Sea Widow navigated away towards Crete, and the reported site where the gate had been buried in all manner of ancient wreckage of Nessus once, foolishly known as Atlantis. Even the domain of dreamers and the dead forever cut short of completing their final words. But another ship followed, a lithe, black ship, swifter than wind. On her deck loomed the figure of Matteo La Fenice, once Lucetta's lover, now a mercenary. He was armed with a rifle etched with spells. I don't care what she is, he mumbled. If she so much as threatens Venice, I kill her. The waves parted before him. So did fate. As dawn grays broke over the Ionian Sea, Lucetta stood at the stern of the Sea Widow, with the dagger in her hand. Veliage stood by her side, the winds hissing in and out of her cloak, as if a snake wrapping itself. You're a girl, she said. You need to make up your mind soon. If the gate is opened, there is no turning back. Lucetta turned toward her, defiant. You want me to seal it? To forget everything? Velia's voice was quiet. I want you to remember. But some memories are best kept below the tide. In Venice, the water level soon started to rise inauspiciously. The floods extended into the streets of San Polo. Fish fell from the sky at Murano. The bells of San Marco toll by themselves. And, in the Doge's chambers, a final murmur passed between the dying ruler's lips. Bride of the sea, beware. He died, with eyes wide open, and outside, in the canals, a fresh tide rose, not of water, but of memory. The sky over Crete was blood-free. The overhead clouds moved as a dense, unbroken blanket of grey, and the island lay beneath a twilight no dusk had any right to show. The ruins of Nessus arose from the ground like the bones of an ancient beast half buried, overgrown with vines, and wet with salt. Once the palace of kings and labyrinths, legends and monsters, but none of those had the whole truth to tell, for seismic shifted under Nessus far beneath, lay the gate of the drowned, and here it was anchored off its shore. The Sea Widow Lucetta, disembarking onto the rocky shore. Lucetta's boots sunk briefly into sand, moss-covered sand. Returning behind her were Velia and Niccolo, the coral dagger safely hidden up beneath Lucetta's coat. She could feel this coarse vibration, as if she repossessed a second heartbeat. A compass, not northward, but down toward memory, toward myth, and also, quite possibly, toward annihilation. Here is where it starts, Velia said, dropping to one knee to lay her hand against the stone foundation of the ruin. And where it once ended, Niccolo scanned the clone. We're being watched. They were. Two eyes blinked from behind a crumbling column. Matteo La Fenice observed through the lens of his rifle, face inscrutable. He was a lone man, but the heart of a hero beat within him. He did not wish to kill Lucetta, but orders had arrived in coin and code from the Council of Ten. If she would open the gate, the world would be a different place. And Venice would fall. They descended through the ruins, down past fallen halls and broken frescoes, past columns that still showed bulls and stars, into a narrow corridor of stone, not cut by any tool but by running liquid. This was not King's work. It was older, smoother, organic. This is not Minoan, Niccolo hissed. No, Villia said. It is pelagic, the drowned people. They constructed temples where the land met the sea. They worshipped what lived beneath. The hallway led out into a huge cavern. The air was sultry, muggy and vibrating with something unsaid. The chamber had, at its center, a pool of water, black, motionless, and completely circular. It was surrounded by carved spirals in the stone. Lucetta had halted on the margin of the water. The mark on her wrist burned. This is the threshold, Villia whispered. Once you enter, you can never leave the same. Niccolo moved to her side. We don't have to do this. We can return to Venice. We can warn them. No, Lucetta said. This is bigger than Venice. Sheathed in the coral dagger, she emerged from the wrapping and advanced. But before her foot could fall in the water, there was a bang. The bullet snapped into the rock beside her. Matteo stepped out of the shadows holding a rifle. Don't move, he said. Matteo, Lucetta said, shocked. You don't know what's underneath that water. You don't know what you'll wake. Neither do you. I don't have to. I've seen the omens, the floods, the whispers. The sea is turning. We were ordered if she makes it to the gate, shoot her. He leveled the rifle again, but before he could fire, the water shifted. Not a ripple, or even a splash. It rose. A column of dark liquid coiled up, writhing, lengthening, taking a shape. In moments, it assumed the shape of a figure tall, the shadow of a cloak, face obscured by two glowing eyes. The guardian, Matteo, staggered back. Villia dropped to her knees. It has been waiting. The guardian was talking, but words weren't sound. Only the key may pass. The blood that remembers. The bride of the drowned. Lucetta felt her limbs lock. The air thinned. I'm not ready, she whispered. You were born ready. The gate remembers your name. She advanced into the pool. The second her foot hit the ground, it disappeared from under her, and she went falling. She didn't fall into water, but falling into memory. She was underwater, but able to breathe. Donna twisted the light above, and below was a city stone buildings festooned with shining runes. Coral towers, doorways without doors. A black monolith hovered in its midst, over the height of any building, ringed by 6 halos of light. She heard chanting, saw women in robes, felt pain. The pelagic people swore that they would guard the topside from that which we had entombed. We failed. Now you must choose. Lucetta approached the monolith. The reflection gazes back at her, not her, but something else. A woman with eyes the color of the sea, and hair like armfuls of kelp, and silvered veins in her body. Not human, not entirely. The dagger hung in front of her. Stab the gate, and it will slumber once more. Let it open, and drown will rise, all of them. You inherit the memory of a people that opted for silence. But silence is a prison. Tears welled. In her eyes, I don't know what's right. Then choose what is true. She took the dagger and thrust it into the monolith above. The pool exploded in a ring of water and light. Lucetta emerged gasping, clutching the naudal dagger. The mark on her wrist was gone. Villia grinned, tears in her eyes. You sealed it. Lucetta nodded. For now, Matteo had lowered his gun. I saw it. Whatever that was, it's part of me now, Lucetta said. Niccolo embraced her, but thousands of miles and an ocean away. The skies over Venice darkened still more, and in the darkest fathom of the Adriatic, something ancient stirred not in anger, but in hunger. It wasn't as if the seal would last forever. Venice was always a city of thresholds, water and stone, past and present, sin and sanctity, but the line had never felt so fragile. When the sea widow came back, the lagoon was an ash-colored sky above its coral floor. No gulls screamed, no bells rang. The wind blew in abnormal formations, whispering and twisting through alleys. As the ship docked, silent, close to the arsenal, the gondoliers standing on shore crossed themselves and mumbled prayers in dialects older than Latin. Lucetta stepped ashore first. She had changed. Her amber eyes were a faint green and silver. Before, despite remaining human, her skin had a slight iridescence, like moonlight on the bottom of the ocean. But it was her, the sheer heft of her. that gave even the shadows pause. Niccolo had come behind, his coat wet and gritty from sea spray, the ancient map wrapped in oilskin under his arm. He appeared weary, but there was steel in his stride. Velia remained on the ship. She said she was done at the gate. "You are Venice now," she had said to Lucetta, "for better or worse." The Council of 10, which had assembled in full within the Doge's palace, a rare occurrence that even war could not bring about, had to wait for Desdemona to emerge from the ceremony. They murmured in hushed tones, cloaked and somber, seated at a long table carved from Adriatic stone. "One way or another, she came back alive," added Councillor Malpiro, his eyes like knives as well. "With the boy and the key. They say she is the key." And the Doge's chair was vacant at the upper end. The man had died 3 days before, apparently while sleeping, choking on seawater, the doctor could tell, without the man showing any other signs of having drowned. Now power twisted itself recklessly between them, the councillors each jockeying to wear the invisible crown. "Bring her in," one growled. But before the guards exchanged a word, the doors to the chamber opened. Lucetta walked in, uninvited, unhindered. Niccolo followed, unarmed. Silence fell like snow. Councillor Malpiro rose. "And you have the audacity to come in here unsummoned." Lucetta's gaze was cold. "A white-robed ulama sent me to the drowned gate. It was I who came back from there. I'm not going to kneel before men who hide behind marble and ink." Gasps. A few stood, hands on hilts. Niccolo spread the old map out on the table. "This is what you want. The threshold of Mayor Arkelter. But you don't know what it takes." Malpiro sneered. "Then educate us." Lucetta stepped forward. "The gate sleeps once more, but its dreams seep into ours, and the sea will keep calling, and others, Ottoman, heretic, and worse, who know where it is now. You believed you could hide it away. You were wrong. Then what do you propose?" Another councillor asked. "Do we destroy it?" "You can't destroy the sea," said Lucetta, "but you can respect it." She turned to leave. "Where are you going?" Malpiro demanded. "To prepare." "For what?" Lucetta paused in the doorway. "For the second opening." The following day, waters of the Grand Canal rose 3 feet in an hour. No rain, no moon, just the tide that never should have come. In the ghetto of Cannaregio, screaming children woke up, speaking dead dialects and drawing spirals on the walls. At San Zaccaria, a priest drowned in the baptistry, however the font was dry, and in a crypt of the church of Santa Maria Gloriosa dei Frari, a chamber sealed for centuries shattered, etched into the walls, is pelagic script, which had been glowing dimly from within. When the seal is broken, the bride is chosen again. On this balcony of Cobregadin, Lucetta had stood on that night, and looked out over the city. Behind her Matteo sat silently sharpening his blade. "You're seeing me," she said, without turning. "You might not be yourself anymore." Lucetta turned. "I'm more myself than I've ever been. But you brought back something with you." She didn't deny it. "Now the sea is inside me," she said. "Its memory, its voice, but I still choose who I am." Matteo nodded slowly. "If you ever don't, you'll kill me." He looked away. "I'll try." A long silence. Lucetta murmured gently, "Do you recall when we were only lies and lovers?" Matteo smiled faintly. "Now we're truth and enemies." She stepped toward him. "Not enemies." He stood. "Not lovers either." A pause. "Maybe something new," she said. "Maybe." Meanwhile, at a crumbling monastery near the island of San Michel, Admiral Safi Al-Rahman held an audience with a certain secret envoy of the choir of Saint Spiridione. "The girl has come back," the monk muttered. The gate was sealed. Safi's expression was unreadable. "For how long?" "No one knows." She looked out at the sea. "Then we begin phase 2. Late that night, Niccolo discovered Lucetta writing a letter by flame of candle. She folded it, sealed it with red wax, and gave it to him. "If anything happens to me," she said, "then please give this to Velia." "What does it say?" "My true name." Niccolo held the letter tightly. "Do you think it's coming?" "The second opening." She looked toward the sea. "It's already begun. Deep beneath the lagoon, in a miles-wide chasm older than language, something stirred. Not awakened. Not yet, but stirred. And like water coursing through stony veins and arteries, toward Venice, the city's pulse quickened, not from fear, from memory. Venice is a city of masks, not just those that manifest themselves during carnival, but the ones engraved in stone and law, flesh and silence. Below the gondolas, lace and painted ceilings. For centuries it held something older even than its own myths, but now the masks were coming off, and memory was seeping out around the edges. Lucetta was on the top of the Campanile di San Marco at daybreak. The whole city was silent beneath her, too quiet. The cacophony of vendors, the laughter of children chasing pigeons, even the ringing of the cathedral bells, all hushed. The lagoon shimmered unnaturally. It didn't move, it breathed. Behind her, Niccolo trundled out of the tower stairwell, breathing hard. "You didn't come home last night," he said. Lucetta didn't turn. "I've had dreams of a city below the lagoon, but it wasn't a dream." He stepped beside her. Then where was it? She finally looked at him. I think it was real. A library, a drowned one, an archive where the pelagic people kept their memories not on parchment, but in water." Niccolo blinked. A water library. More than that, a vault. A truth so deep the sea forgot it. He frowned. "You want to find it?" "Have to." That evening, in the church of San Giorgio dei Greci, Lucetta and Niccolo went again to see Father Benedetto. The old priest was ashen and trembled in his hands. His sleep had been haunted from the moment the first rusty gate creaked open. "The Library of Salt," he whispered, when Lucetta described her vision. "I didn't think it was real." "You've heard of it?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "A pelagic vault, protected by the last living recollection of their high priestess, or so it is suggested. They thought it was sacred, not something to be spoken or written out, but registered." "Where is it?" "According to the legend, it's under Venice, not under a building, under the city itself, close by where the oldest walls meet the sea without an intermediary." Niccolo's voice was tight. "That would be the column of the tides." Father Benedetto nodded. "Where Venice began, where it may end." Night led by map, mark, and a sensation of something ancient stirring in her bones. Lucetta took Niccolo and Matteo through a hidden passage in an area so loathsome that not even rats would inhabit it. They followed brine-soaked corridors, passing archways made slippery by millennia of secret tides, until they found it, a spiral stair descending into serene, still water. Lucetta hesitated. Her dagger thrummed against her side once, and was still. "I'll go first," she said. Matteo grabbed her arm. "If something pulls you under, I'll scream." "I mean it." "So do I." She stepped into the water. It didn't feel like water. It felt like time. Down the spiral they went, the surface disappearing below them. No light, no breath, just pressure and presence. Then suddenly they broke through. To a room of profound quiet. It was spherical. The walls were made of coral and black glass. Pillars rose from floor to ceiling, like the legs of giants, and floating in the middle of the room were droplets, hundreds of them hanging in the air like stars. Each one pulsed faintly. "What are they?" Niccolo whispered. "Memories," Lucetta said. She touched one, reaching out in a moment. It had drawn her in. She was aboard a pelagic ship, standing on deck, as a storm bore down. The woman next to her was chanting in a language she was not supposed to be able to understand, but she did. Then, screams, the roar of crashing waves, and the ship tilting forward into darkness. She gasped and shook her hand. Matteo steadied her. "Are you all right?" They remember everything, every death, every flood, all the lies Venice was built upon. Niccolo touched another droplet. He witnessed the creation of Venice, though not by rebels from the mainland as history suggested, but by the remnants of the first flood, the men and women scattered away from the opening of the first gate. They built Venice not as refuge, but as a jest. They built the city over the wound, he said. But Lucetta went to the far wall. One carving there, newer than the others, bore a symbol all of them knew, the seal of the Council of 10. They knew, she whispered. The council always knew. She touched the carving. A doorway opened. Behind this they discovered the crypt of the final high priestess. She was perfectly preserved, seated in a chair of coral, her skin as pale blue, her eyes closed. In her lap was a scroll, with wax sealed. Lucetta reached for it. The priestess opened her eyes. They were not hostile, not even alive, but they were watching. "Speak," Lucetta said. There was no voice, but something came to her in a way that she knew it was her own thoughts. A flood of knowledge. The scroll unveiled itself in her mind, not as symbols but as purpose. The gate is not singular. The gate is not passive. It is a cycle. And in every age, we have to pick, forget, or become. The first option was to deny it. The second must be different. Lucetta took the scroll anyway. Carpio and Sanity vomited as the water in the chamber turned. One after another, the little floating droplets came tumbling down, not to the ground but upward, toward Venice. Up on the surface, in the Piazza San Marco, terrified people screamed when falling raindrops didn't splash them, but created a memory interrupted by a feeling on a sense interior, near the rim of the ear. Visions of cities underwater, children lost, monsters rising. A millennia of lies concealed the truth. The people of Venice went down on their knees, in fear, holding their heads under the weight of borrowed nightmares. The windows were closed in the Palazzo Ducale by the Council of 10. "It's happening," Malpiro whispered. One councillor sprinted to a mirror. Then the prophecy interrupted by the sound of glass shattering. Then a voice from nowhere. "Truth rises. The sea remembers. The city must choose. Lucetta and the rest have come up at the Rialto." The water there glowed faintly. Niccolo stared in disbelief. "We didn't just encounter the past, we unleashed it." Lucetta opened the scroll. "This isn't prophecy," she said. "It's a test." She looked toward the basilica. "We have to make it to the bell of the deep." "The what?" Matteo asked. Niccolo paled. "No, that's just legend." Lucetta shook her head. "It's beneath San Marco." It was no add-on. It was there from the ground up. The bell was cast in metal, drowned. That gongs only if the tide is going to choose. Decide what. Lucetta looked toward the sea, whether to reclaim or forgive. Venice, in the year of our Lord 1760. The sky was now a burnt amber as the sun nuzzled the domes and turrets of La Serenissima. The piazzas were full of shadows cast by the marble statues, and lanterns were flickering to life in the windows of the opulent palazzos that lined the Grand Canal. Wind brought the scent of salt and perfume, lapping water, and the faint melancholy of a gondolier's song. The city dangled between sea and sky, glittery as a dream, but under the silken candlelight, a low-grade disquiet stirred. Down a dark cale behind the Basilica di Santa Maria della Salute stepped a figure through the gloom. Lucia Bellariva, daughter of the great historian and once an advisor to the Doge, Vittorio Bellariva. She was clothed in a dark velvet mantle, her face concealed behind lace. She found her hand was gloved and holding a sealed scroll bearing the lion of St. Mark in crimson wax. Her slippers were of such dull fat leather that they made no sound on the moist cobblestones as she hurried forward. This time, the message was desperate, and time was not her friend. Lucia's destination was nearby, the secret courtyard of Palazzo Marciano, a dilapidated palace whose grandeur had tarnished, along with the fortunes of its original, gilded occupants. Only a handful of Venetians were even aware that people still used the well. To the world outside, it was left for the ghosts of a defunct republic. But inside its ivy-covered walls, the Council of Shadows continued to convene. It was a secret council of scholars, spies, retired diplomats, and a handful of disgraced nobles. They came together as Venice fell from political relevance, because they felt a duty to rescue the legacy of the Republic from the gnashing teeth of other nation-states, France, Austria, even the emerging British Empire. But tonight it was closer to home. Lucia stepped upon the courtyard, where under a hook of wrought iron hung a lantern. The wind whispered a warning through the stone archway. Down at the foot of the lantern was an old man wrapped in a hooded cloak. He turned as she drew near, eyes as keen as blades, a hooked nose that set off a familiar face. "Lucia," he asked, "you aren't being followed?" She shook her head. "No, Zeno, but I worry it's even worse than we thought." Zeno di Grimani was among the last scions of a family that had formerly held doges and diplomats. Now, he was hardly anything more than an antique, and a lethal one at that. His mind was still sharp, and his memory was an armory of secrets. He accepted the parchment from her and broke the seal before reading in silence. His face became paler with every line. "This came from Vienna?" he asked. Lucia nodded. "Smuggled on the cargo hold of a Habsburg merchant ship. Father knew the risks. He read the letter that was intercepted. He read it 3 days ago. He got poisoned." Zeno looked away, cursing softly in Latin. "We were afraid Austria would acquire an interest in the canal routes. But they mean to set up a puppet doge. The election in 2 weeks. If we don't intervene, the Republic might fall without a single shot being fired." Lucia's eyes blazed. "Then we must stop the vote." Zeno looked at her. "We will do more than that. Across the Grand Canal, Meanwhile, in the gilded chambers of the Palazzo Contarini del Bovolo, masked revelers pressed together for a party. Gold shimmered on gowns and fans. Diamonds sparkled in hair, powdered white as the moon. Music played from the keys of a harpsichord, as clinking crystal goblets accompanied each toast. Among the revelers was Count de Varnier, who was there representing the French court. His face was concealed by a mask of black lacquer and feathers, but he was betrayed by his voice. The women huddled in close as he spoke, seduced not just by his foreign accent, but by the power he embodied. By his side stood a Venetian nobler Morosini, recently raised to the Senate. He was tall, good-looking, and ambitious, with eyes that told less than they knew. Alvis, it was whispered, had spent his youth in the shadow of St. Peter's Basilica, dealing bribes and sealing pacts with papal envoys. Tonight, Alvis was smiling. Our city is built on dreams, Count, but men like us mold what lies beneath the veil. De Varnier touching his glass with his. Meantime the Count had raised his glass. 2 veils. Then they drank. In the balcony alcove behind them, a young servant observed in silence. It was Luca, 17-year-old boy, whose mother had once been in service with the Bellariva family. He was without title, without land, without a name that counted. But all he had were his ears and a sharp mind. What he heard that night would shape Venice's future. The city's maze of alleys was abuzz with rumors by midnight. News had a way of spreading with notable celerity in Venice, not by horses and carriages, but by gondoliers, fishmongers and courtesans. The very cats of Venice appeared to harbor secrets in their green-glow eyes. At the docks on the dark side of the Dorso Duro, where shadows lay like wolves in wait, a woman who called herself La Contessa had an appointment with a smuggler. No one knew who she really was, only that she flowed through the city like silk and cut it down like a blade. Her customers included English poets and Ottoman merchants. But tonight she had wanted only one thing: a map, the first canal routes, she said, before the acceleration under Doge law. The smuggler frowned. That map has not been sighted in 50 years. La Contessa smiled over her fan. Then, Amorci, El Macine Eterna is overdue for a resurrection. As the first light of day pushed the dark aside, Zeno di Grimani stood on top of the Scala Contarini del Bovolo, the towering spiral that looked out on half the city. In the distance sounded the bell of St. Mark. Fog closed in among the chimney tops as forgotten ghosts. Behind him, Lucia slinked into the light, her cloak dew-damp. "You saw the tower in your father's dream, didn't you?" Zeno went on. Lucia nodded. "The final vote happens right here. Alvis Morosini wants to crown himself on the spot where the doges used to speak to the people." Zeno smiled grimly. "Then we must write history before his name is written in blood." Lucia's eyes narrowed. "And if we fail?" Zeno laid a hand on her shoulder. "Then Venice is a museum, and not a republic." They greeted the morning tide in silence. But in the lanes down below, the gondolas slid like shadows over the water. The whisper flew from oar to oar, from pier to pier. And the city listened. The night had spoken. The gondolas held more than just passengers now. They held secrets. And thus began Venice's long night, the night in which masks would be yanked from faces and truth pulled up from the shadows, in which the destiny of a forgotten republic would not be determined in its courtrooms and council chambers, but in its streets and canals, in the whispers that slithered through the heart of the city of water. Venice. A week before the election of the Doge, a grey haze rested on the Grand Canal that muffled sounds and veiled the entire city in a foreign fog. Gondolas glided past like ghostly apparitions in the dawn light, their shapes merging with the fog. Off in the distance, the bells of San Giorgio Maggiore tolled the hour 7, ringing across the lagoon like a funereal chant. On the hushed walls of the Biblioteca Marciana, one of Europe's most ancient and venerable libraries, stood Lucia Bellariva, surrounded by aged tomes and parchment rolls. The smell of time, dust, ink, leather rose dense from the air. She ran her hand along the foreign gilded spine, then removed a well-used codex from the rack. At her side was Luca, the sharp-eared servant boy, who picked up secrets that even courtiers overlooked. "This is said to be the library containing the memories of all doges," Lucia murmured. Luca, his voice down to a whisper, replied, "And maybe the sins too." Lucia smiled faintly. "We want both, if we are to know what Alvis Morosini really desires." The codex was heavy, its binding made of faded red velvet. She set it down on the desk to read, and the clasp creaked when she unlocked it. It contained the minutes of a long-lost Dogal session council that had been assembled during a time of almost identical darkness, nearly 2 centuries previous. The scribes recorded their discussions, some of them scrawled hurriedly into the margins with expressions like papal infiltrazione and Alianza Franca Pericolo. She poked a gloved finger down on a name in the text, Alves Morosini's ancestor, also Alves, as he tried to rewrite the Republic's law of the seas, providing that the exclusive privilege of passage through the waters of Venice was reserved to the French Navy. The proposal was defeated barely. He mysteriously died a week later. Luca leaned closer. Do you suppose the present Alves is on the same path? No. Lucia closed the book. I think he's taken a lesson from his ancestors. Defeat. He is not going to propose anything in the council chamber. He'll run the Republic from the shadows. On the other side of the canal, the noble palace behind the front of Comorosine showed no trace of treason. It lived richly. Carved lions roared from, yes, walls, and marble floors glittered like mirrors, and there were chandeliers dashy enough to cast golden light over chambers hung with tapestries from Florence and paintings from the hand of Titian. Himself Alves Morosine was gazing into his mirror, newly shaven and dressed all in black velvet. The folds of his cravat were arranged by his valet with the precision of a dietitian handling food. Count Divania has a message, announced the valet. The French ambassador, 3 days hence, will be here. I imagine there has to be discreet final arrangements. Alves nodded, and he did not look his valet in the eye. He was preoccupied by the votes he was trying to round up, the rumors he put out, the council members whose children were now attending lavish parties, campaigning underwritten by him. He entered his own small private study, a map of Venice laid wide open on an oak table. From here, the city seemed almost like a spider's web, thin, snaky canals and bridges connecting them like stitches between blood vessels. But Alves was not staring at the map. He was perusing a letter that was stuck together with wax impressed, with an imperial eagle-Austrian dot. He read it slowly, his lips moving into a line. The Habsburgs were growing impatient. 2 weeks, the letter said, or we will act independently. He folded it and put it in a dummy drawer behind a bookcase. Then it was time for another errand, one that letters could not accomplish. He unlocked a small wooden chest under his desk. Inside was a silver mask with an elongated beak, a medico della peste, as once worn by plague doctors, but now only during carnival. He ran his fingers over it. It's time to bring back the old rituals, he said low-voiced. The sky cried over Venice that night. Rain drummed the rooftops, transforming the canals into black mirrors. Gondoliers pulled their hats low and rode through downpours, while courtesans tightened their silks around them as they walked the slippery bridges. 7 figures stood in a circle of candlelight in the crypt. Below, Chiesa di San Moise. The water below them sparkled bright in the flickering flames. Everyone was wearing a mask, long-nosed, feathered, featureless. One voice broke the silence. We have met tonight, not as nobles or scholars, but as Venetians, united not by blood, but by purpose. It was Zeno di Grimani, his white beard concealed under a hood, his eyes showing through an old senator's mask. The information from Lucia confirms our worst fears. The Austrians, under Morosini, want to seat a loyalist doge in our government. If he was, Venice is a puppet state. F off. Another figure in a mask, a woman, by the sound of the voice chimed in. What do you propose, Zeno? Assassination? A rebellion? Zeno's response was calm. Nothing is more perilous than knowledge. We knock not with swords, but with truth. He nodded toward Lucia, who had said nothing from the edge of the circle. She offered up a rolled parchment, pulled from her sleeve. The parchment spread across a crate. It was a detailed diary of Morosini's future appointments, parties, private meetings, council dinners. We expose him, she said. We make his allies into enemies. We tear him down, image by image, until no one will ever vote for him. Again, a new voice hissed from the darkness. And if he adapts, these men are slippery. They survive on lies. Lucia's voice held steel. Then we outlie the liar. At the Teatro La Fenice, while preparations were being made for a gala performance of Orfeo ed Eurydice for the most influential Venetians, afterward there would be a masked ball, the perfect setting for secrets to be exchanged, and alliances to be compared. Lucia, who wore a pale lavender dress and was costumed as Eurydice, sat up with the chorus. Her arrival at the gala had to be understated. None of them could know she was back in Venice's elite. On stage, she looked out and saw them. Alves chuckling with a papal delegate, Count de Varnier whispering to a Doge elector from Murano, and a German officer wearing an iron cross of the Habsburg court. They were here, all of them, and none realized they were under surveillance. Lucia stole into the ballroom, having doffed her costume for one in black, with a dark veil made of black lace. She made her way more seamlessly than she otherwise might through the crowd, catching fragments of conversation transfer of funds in Malta, strange troop movements near Trieste, mentions of a name she had not heard in years. Bartholomew, Verona. She paused. Bartholomew had at one time led the command of the Venetian navy Arnaud, respected until he vanished on a campaign in the Ionian Sea. Some said he went pirate, others that he ran off to Constantinople. Why was his name coming up now? She whirled, and to her surprise, he was there, beside the fountain in the ballroom, older, scarred, but unmistakable. Bartholomeo. Just as she started to walk forward, someone stepped in front of her. Alvis Morosini. He bent, politely extending his gloved hand. "May I have this dance?" Lucia hesitated. Behind the mask, he had not recognized her. She placed her hand in his. The orchestra started a waltz. Together they glided forward. His light proved secure and steady, and hers uncertain. "You dance like you don't belong here," he said with a smile. "And you sound like someone who doesn't trust anyone," she responded. He narrowed his eyes now. "My lord, tell me, how would Venice fare in the hands of foreign power?" "If such power were exercised among the sons of Serenus," replied the young civilian. Alvis's smile faltered. "You pose dangerous questions to one you know nothing about. Then I'm maybe not a stranger." The dance ended. Alves took a step back, his eyes looking for hers. Before he could say anything, she disappeared into the group. That night, in the attic of Palazzo Marciano, Lucia had written by candlelight not scrupulously, no, but as best she could, so that nothing at all, was omitted. The door opened, and Zeno appeared with a letter in his hand, sealed with wax. This arrived by gondola, no sender. Lucia opened it carefully. Within, on a small piece of parchment, was written only one line: "Beware the lion that submits to the eagle." She looked up. "It's a warning." Zeno nodded. "The eagle is the Habsburg bird, the lion Saint Mark. Somewhere, on the inside, someone still fights for Venice," said Lucia. Zeno pointed to the window. A gondola floated slowly past on the canal below. Both had gondoliers unclothed alike, and no lantern shone in the prow. There was a man sitting in there, looking up at them. Lucia shrank towards the glass, but the figure put out a hand and the gondola sank out of sight under the Ponte della Paglia. The game had changed. The whispers had moved to quiet, and now there were silences. There were screams under the quiet, and Venice, beautiful, secretive, drowning Venice, was readying itself for war. Venice, 5 days before the Dogal election. The moon was low and bloated and white, an eye watching unblinking across the lagoon. The water was silver under the brow of dawn. Long before the gondoliers had come out, or the last reveller had gone indoors to silk-sheeted frolics, the city seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something to rise from its ancient stones. The tombs of the doges were held in perpetual vigil in the crypt. Below Chiesa di San Giovanni e Paolo, their marble effigies, hands arrayed over crossed swords, eyes shut in the contemplation of death, guarded the living. Zeno di Grimani paced the columns on cushioned feet, his cane tapping softly on the flagstones. At his side, Lucia Bellariva's face was hidden beneath her cowl. They were not alone. Torches lighted up the chamber, and a ring of dancing shadows, and disclosed 7 figures each, one a remnant of Venice's waning splendors. The exiled senators, the forgotten naval captains, the aging keepers of the archive whose memories kept alive the truths history meant to bury. The circle of shadows was no more. Zeno stepped up and coughed. "Our enemy multiplies," he said. "Morosini has not only papal sympathy, but silent assent of Austria. He is now meeting with delegates from Lombardy, Tyrol, and beyond." Lucia laid a scroll out on the stone altar. "We intercepted a missive from the Austrian delegate at the Cave Benjamin. It contains directives to pressure 3 important electors, Orsini di Limico, Girolamo della Rovere, and the senior Ludovico Bentiveggio." An old woman in a cloak, who was called La Madre, put on her treetop spectacles and stared into the names. Della Rovere can be purchased, she offered straightforwardly. We know what he owes the PayPal bank. Orsini is loyal, but tired. Bentivoglio, however, he's a ghost. Zeno frowned. A ghost. Sina, whomever gets to him first can lead his vote. Lucia raised her voice. Then we need to find him before Morosini. I suggest we send an independent, someone without a political affiliation, someone he might trust. La Madre cackled. Neutral. In Venice, you wouldn't know anything about that, would you, Luca? Zeno asked the boy who had moved to the periphery of the shadows again. He's just a kid, Zeno said. But Luca's clever, invisible, and most of all, invisible to the ones who think themselves strong. Luca stiffened. You want me to call a Dogal elector? Lady Lucia put her hand on his shoulder. Not speak, listen, observe, and, if the time comes, persuade. Luca hesitated, then nodded. Where is Bentivoglio? Zeno's eyes narrowed. In Murano. But for 2 years, he has not left his villa. His friends say his home is like a musical hall of mirrors. There are no two Bentivoglios that look alike. On the same day, under a sky painted grey, broken by the screaming of seagulls, a gondola pulled away from the dock at Fondamento Nuovo and slipped silently on towards Murano. The city that lay beyond it melted into mist. Luca rode in the passengers, seat attired in the livery of a messenger out of the Doge's own household. The ploy had owed Zeno a favour to an old tailor, but it would by entry. The villa rose up on the northwest end of the glassmaker's island, a dilapidated mansion, hemmed in by encrusted backyards and tall iron gates. Luca got out, followed the gravel path and rapped on the door. The door opened with a creak, and an ancient servant emerged, as if plucked from driftwood. The servant motioned him in without speaking. The interior was bizarre walls, smothered in mirrors, some convex, some warped. Someone was playing music in the hallway, a string quartet, but off-tune and far away. Bentivoglio was in a long velvet robe of dark emerald, his thin white hair tied behind him in a queue, his face lined but alert. He looked at Luca like a new chess piece laid out on a well-known board. From the doge he whispered, forgetting even to raise his voice. Luca bowed. Yes, Excellenza, I am the harbinger of ... regrets. It's been too long since your lordship graced the heart of the city. Bentivoglio laughed, the noise dry and brittle. The heart, my dear boy, Venice has more than one heart. I've been watching them all. He gestured to the mirrors. Luca looked around the space. He'd only just realized that some of the mirrors weren't mirrors, but were instead peepholes, or slits of windows into other rooms. On one wall was the reflection of the lagoon. On another, a hall illuminated by a candle, and through which a woman in white peeped by degrees. Bentivoglio drank from a tumbler of heavy wine. Tell me, what does young Morosini say of me now? You are on your guard, and on the lookout for anything that could be used to your credit. So he is of the opinion, Luca answered cautiously, that your excellency is the last voice of reason in the Republic. He has asked me to ask for your blessing. Bentivoglio's eyes narrowed. Does he now? He rose, moving towards a great stained glass window, and the light made her robes perform picturesque dances of color. Silence is often misinterpreted as support, especially with young men, he murmured, but I have seen too many puppets become doge. On each occasion, it was more expensive for the Republic than profitable. He turned abruptly. Just you tell your master this. I will vote for no candidate without being first promised one. Thing. Luca pressed on. And what is that, Excellenza? Bentivoglio smiled. To let Venice die with dignity. Back in the city, inside the Palazzo Ducali, the Doge Andrea Regna was sitting alone in his private study, gazing at a painting of Venice's own foundation. He had silver hair and sallow skin. A doctor stood nearby, applying oils to the wrists of the Doge. The doctor dismissed the doctor and withdrew. An envelope from a drawer of his table to Zeno di Group. It read. He paused and placed another e-note below it. I have postponed as long as I could. The foreign voices grow louder. If they try to make me announce Alves as the new Doge before the vote, you have to stop them. Find the child. She knows more of something she shouldn't. He closed the letter again and rung for an express. That night, the skies opened up and a storm rumbled in. The winds were shrieking over the rooftops of the castle. The lightning went crawling above the canals in blue stipples. It corkscrewed down from the high skylights in blue ropes. In one of the rooms of the Cura Rezonico was in progress a masked ball, an irregular meeting of the electors, which no one would own. Feathered cancan dancers swirled across the marble floor, as violins sounded a ghostly version of La Fallia. Lucia came disguised in a Venetian widow's veil and gloves dyed with crushed lapis. She looked round. Count D'Avarnia was talking to two cardinals. Morosini was laughing with two noblewomen, whose shield of arms was powdered with the lilies of France. Then she spotted him. Again Bartholomew da Verona. He leaned against the wine table in his torn and stained naval uniform. His eyes darted around the room like a soldier preparing for an ambush. She approached. "You had been declared dead," she said in a low voice. He turned, startled, then relaxed. "Lucia, do you know my name?" He smiled grimly. "I knew your father." They made their way to a balcony over the rain-slicked Grand Canal. She pressed him for answers. "I was in the vicinity of Corfu when I was detained," Bartholomew answered. "Sold to Ottoman traders, escaped to Malta. I came back to find the Republic did not want men like me." Lucia's voice trembled. "Then why are you here now?" "Because Venice is about to erase its own past, and men like Morosini don't deserve to come into it." He gave her a folded parchment. Upon it were diagrams, concealed compartments in the foundation of the Doge's palace, secret passageways, forgotten guard tunnels. "On vote night," said Bartholomew, "you're going to need another way in." Lucia accepted the parchment and looked into his eyes. "We are not alone in this," she muttered. "No," he said, "but we're outnumbered." In a secret loft above Campo San Polo, Luca returned one evening to find Zeno waiting for him, a Doge's letter in hand. Addy read it out loud, his voice trembling. "The child?" Luca asked. "What child?" Zeno's eyes went distant. "It stands for Lucia," he said, at last. "Something her father discovered years ago. Something about the founding families. Once a secret vote that was never recorded. Lucia just returned from the Cura Rezonico. Heard them. My dad told me stories," she said, "of a chamber that lies forgotten beneath the palace. From a secret, a hidden, a closet vote." Zeno nodded. "That vote may still stand, and if it does, Morosini can no longer be crowned, and the whole line of succession is void." Lucia stepped forward. "Then we find the chamber, and we uncover the truth." Thunder cracked above them. The murmur was now a roar. Above the square, the bells of San Marco sounded throughout the night, but nobody knew why. A sound came up from within the old crypts beneath the basilica, low, throbbing hum which made the stone vibrate and the water in the canals shiver, and that appeared to travel out over the unlit surface of the lagoon. Lucetta, Niccolo, and Matteo slunk forwards into the humid passages. They walked on walls of salt marked with blue-tinged etched runes. "This is the very heart of Venice," Lucetta whispered, "where the soul of the city meets the sea." Before them they came to a great chamber lighted with the flickering radiance of phosphorescent moss. Hanging in its midst was a bell, huge and old, made of metals said to be scavenged from wrecked ships and imbued with the substance of the mare occulta. "The bell of the deep," Niccolo breathed. Matteo inspected the carvings of eyes, waves and serpents that covered its surface, and ran his hand over them. "It's alive." Velia's voice rang out unexpectedly from the dark. "The bell does not ring for sound," she stated. "It rings for fate." Lucetta advanced and placed her hand on the cold brass of the bell. The tattoos hummed beneath her fingers, kept time with her pulse. "This bell," she explains, "decides when the gate opens or closes." A coldness went down the room. Niccolo looked at her. "So, what does it want?" Before she had time to reply, the bell sounded slow and deep. The vibrations raced through the water, up the stone, into their bones. The chamber trembled. Cracks appeared along the walls. Matteo raised his weapon, then shapes stepped out of the blackness, cloaked members of the choir of Saint Spirit, their voices chanting in the old tongue. "You should not be here," their leader intoned. Lucetta took a step back, still gripping the dagger. "We came to put a stop to this," she said. The choir's answer was a chorus, their mouths spreading spells into the air, and the water in the chamber spiraling in an irate, hypnotized dance. Outside, the lagoon roiled. Venice was at the brink of oblivion. The resonance of the bell of the deep persisted in the dimly lit crypt. Lucetta's breath came fast. The mafia of the oblate sang around them like wailing souls, their songs casting ancient spells beyond the rock. "Stand down," Lucetta demanded. "This is no place for war." The leader of the choir, a man skeletally thin with eyes as hollow as dying stars, moved ahead. You carry a blade that is part of the sea. These are the depths. The blood which you bring is a debt to the depths. Niccolo raised his hands. We are only fighting to defend Venice. The man laughed, a dry, bitter chuckle. Venice is a birthplace of secrets. It has forgotten the price. Suddenly, the chamber trembled harder. Water shot up from a hidden channel, snaking around their feet. Matteo took a shot at the shadows, but the bullets evaporated into vapor. Velia's voice was like a knife through the frenzy. The seal is breaking. Lucetta clutched the coral dagger in both hands. Images pressed into her thoughts, of sunken cities, of things monstrous beneath the waves, of betrayal and sacrifice. But then she understood the truth. The gate was no one thing. It was all a living cycle, feasting on memory, on blood, on choice. To end it would require sacrifice. To leave it open. Doom. Niccolo moved close. What will you do? She examined the faintly glowing runes inscribed on walls. In the chamber, I will take on Venice, she said, but not as they expect. As the water filled, Lucetta's shape began to blur. That mark on her wrist brightening in LUMINOSITY. The struggle below the Venetians had only commenced. The underchamber of San Marco was no longer only stone and shadow. It was alive. The water swirling about, Lucetta was filled with a dim, strange light, casting the faces of the choir in a pallid glow as their chants reached a no more fevered crescendo. Every word felt like it pulled against the very fabric of reality, warping the air into something viscous, forced. Lucetta stood in the middle, and her self's body vibrated with a power she was only beginning to comprehend. It felt less like a weapon and more like a Chianduan capable of locking or unlocking the city's ancient secrets that tethered the Venetian archipelago to the sea. And all at once, the water shot up into figures, spectral images of a ghostly past, the drowned sailors from the Mare Occulta, their faces contorted with sorrow and fury, touched with hands that were nearly transparent. There was a voice that hissed, ages like the ocean, seal the gate, or open the floodgates. Niccolo took a step, and the look in his eyes was one of desperation. Lucetta, there must be another way. Nope, she said, shaking her head, and her tears sparkling. I wish there was. Matteo had forgotten his rifle was slung on his shoulder. Whatever happens, you're not alone. Lucetta raised the dagger one last time. With her dying gasp, the chamber exploded in light. The rising waters smashed through the crypt and spilled into the tunnels beneath Venice. But in that flood, a new force stirred. Not just in the sea, but in her. Venice was no longer stone and canals. They were rivers and memories, flowing together until the past and the present ran together. Lucetta stood in the portico of Cudoro, watching water bleed through the windows, bearing images from the deep of cities, old gods, the things that had been sacrificed to entomb them. Her body was changed. The spot on her wrist had mushroomed all over her arm. The way ink spreads in water, there was a brightness in her eyes that was not of her. And something whispered of the ocean. She was signal and cautionary tale. Niccolo and Matteo were at her side. We cannot resist what is coming, Niccolo said. Venice will have to confront its past. Matteo's gaze was hard. And what if the past doesn't want to be faced? Lucetta turned to them, resolute. Then we fight. For the city, for the future. Yet as the floodwaters pushed upward, so did the voices, whispers from beneath the waves, pledging power, warning of ruin. Venice was drowning, not just in water, but in the weight of memory. The city held its breath, canals of shimmering, liquid glass, reflecting stars and broken memories. Lucetta was standing on the stern, in the dim light of the early daybreak. The city around her was both beautiful and ruined, a patchwork of history, sacrifice and secrets that had been submerged beneath the waves for far too long. Behind her, Niccolo and Matteo, faces exhausted, but tinged with hope, observed. This is it, Lucetta murmured. The second the city remembers who it is. The gondola slipped smoothly through the placid waters, carrying him inexorably toward the heart of Venice Palazzo Ducali, where the gate's power pulsed beneath. The stones, the waters on which they sailed, whispered to them, filled with voices, old and young. The ghostly reverberations of history collided with the drumbeat of now. And as they ascended the steps of the palace, the water rising to meet them again, and figures emerging from it, keepers of memory, guardians of the gate, and those who had awaited this night. Lucetta raised the coral dagger. "I'm the bride of the sea," she said, clear and steady. "I remember those who had been before, and I choose." With one quick, calculated motion, she thrust the dagger into the ancient stone wheat. The palace light exploded in all directions. The gate shut or opened, depending on the eyes that were watching. The waters settled. Venice exhaled, and in the silence that ensued, the gondolas whispered once more, not with fear, but the promise of other stories to be told.